Imagine sitting at a restaurant enjoying your meal, when suddenly, you're drenched in water, humiliated in front of strangers. But this wasn't just any accident, this was a racist attack that would turn a woman's life upside down. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from, and if you haven't already, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more emotional stories like this one. Tasha sat in the corner booth quietly enjoying her meal, unaware that in just a few moments her life would change forever. As she sipped her water, the faint whispers and stares from the waitresses went unnoticed, until one of them made her move. The bustling sounds of the restaurant filled the air, plates clattering, waiters scurrying, and the low hum of conversations weaving together in a tapestry of urban life. But for Tasha, none of it mattered. She sat in a corner booth, her heavy belly rounding out the fabric of her red dress as she sipped slowly from her water glass. It was supposed to be a moment of peace, just her thoughts, and a meal. But even in this quiet corner, she couldn't escape the heavy weight of the stares that followed her. She was pregnant, 8 months along, and every day felt like a new challenge. But today, she thought, she had earned a break. She was just a regular woman, trying to get through the day, trying to enjoy a peaceful meal in the middle of the city. Her long dark hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, her caramel skin glowing softly under the restaurant's lighting. She glanced over at the two waitresses working the floor, chatting among themselves, but their eyes kept drifting over to her. Tasha had learned to ignore the discomfort of being the only black woman in the room. The familiar glances and whispers no longer fazed her, or so she thought. The restaurant was busy, but the waitresses were paying close attention to her. Tasha could feel it. One of them, a blonde with piercing blue eyes, had been staring at her for a while. Tasha shrugged it off, focusing instead on the food in front of her. Her mind wandered to the baby. She had just a few weeks left before the little one would arrive. "Excuse me, ma'am, would you like a refill?" the waitress, still staring, asked in a clipped tone, almost too sharp. Tasha looked up, startled. She gave the woman a polite smile. "No, thank you. Just water is fine," she replied, trying to return to her meal. The blonde waitress didn't move. Instead, she lingered, watching Tasha's every move. There was something about the way she was looking at her, something not right. Tasha shifted uncomfortably in her seat, but tried to ignore it. She was tired and she just wanted to enjoy her meal in peace. Suddenly, the other waitress, a younger woman with brown hair tied up in a messy bun, walked up. She was holding a large pitcher of water. She placed it down on Tasha's table with a little too much force, causing a small splash to drench Tasha's napkin. Tasha's heart skipped a beat. She looked up, her eyes meeting the younger waitress's for just a moment. The woman's expression was cold, almost mocking. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to," the younger waitress started, but her words trailed off when she noticed the blonde waitress smirking behind her. Before Tasha could respond, the blonde waitress stepped forward, leaning in close. "Maybe you should be more careful with your food choices next time," she muttered under her breath, so quietly that Tasha almost didn't catch it. Tasha's face flushed with confusion. Was that a racial slur? She didn't want to jump to conclusions, but it was hard to ignore the underlying tone. She wasn't about to let it slide, though. With a deep breath, she stood up, her voice calm but firm. "Excuse me, but that's not okay," Tasha said, her eyes narrowing. The blonde waitress's smirk faltered, and for a moment, there was a tense silence between them. The younger waitress shifted awkwardly, her eyes darting between them, but the blonde waitress wasn't backing down. Instead, she just laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that seemed to echo through the otherwise calm restaurant. "You think I care? You're just a customer and you'll do as we say," she sneered, her eyes now glaring at Tasha. Tasha's stomach turned. She had dealt with her fair share of microaggressions, but this was something different. It was blatant. It was personal. "I'm not going to let you talk to me like that," Tasha said, her voice now rising. "I will not be treated this way, especially in front of my child." At that moment, something inside Tasha snapped. She wasn't going to sit back and let this woman degrade her. Not today, not when she was so close to the finish line of this pregnancy. The last thing she wanted was to deal with this kind of hatred. As she gathered her things to leave, the blonde waitress made her move. In a swift motion, she grabbed the pitcher of water and poured it all over Tasha's head. The cold water drenched Tasha in an instant, the shock of it freezing her to the spot. The room fell silent as Tasha stood there, water dripping down her face and soaking her clothes. Her mind raced, heart pounding in disbelief. "Now you'll know what it feels like to be nothing," the blonde waitress spat, Tasha's hand flew to her stomach instinctively as she staggered back. Her breathing quickened. Was she okay? Was the baby okay? She didn't care about the restaurant. She didn't care about the waitresses or the humiliation. She only cared about getting to a safe place. Her hands trembling, Tasha turned to leave, but the younger waitress blocked her path. Please, I didn't mean for this to happen, the younger waitress stammered, but it was too late. Tasha was already out the door. Her heart was racing. The world felt like it was spinning as she walked quickly down the street, every step heavier than the last. The water, the humiliation, it was all too much. She could feel the weight of the stares from the other people on the street. They were witnessing her walk out, drenched and broken. Tasha didn't stop walking until she reached her car, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She slammed the door shut behind her, shaking uncontrollably. But it wasn't just the water that left her trembling. It was the realization that something much bigger had just begun. Tasha sat in her car for several minutes, the engine off, her hands gripping the steering wheel as the cold water slowly began to dry. The city's noise surrounded her, honking cars, people chatting, the distant sound of sirens. But it felt like the world was miles away. Inside, she was consumed by a whirlwind of thoughts. Her hands still shook, but it wasn't just from the cold water soaking into her clothes. She had been humiliated in front of a room full of strangers. The cruelty of the waitress's actions had pierced deeper than she expected. And it wasn't just about the water. It was about the utter disregard for her humanity. The slap in the face, the words, the laugh. They had seen her as nothing more than an inconvenience. Someone to be mocked, belittled. The worst part, the baby she was carrying. What if this had harmed the baby? What if the stress of the encounter had caused irreparable damage? Tasha pressed her hand against her belly, trying to calm herself. Please, please be okay, she whispered. But no matter how much she told herself it would be fine, the truth was gnawing at her. Her mind replayed every word, every sneer. There had been no justification for what happened, just pure malice. Her phone buzzed, jolting her from her thoughts. It was a message from her best friend, Marissa. You okay? Just saw a post about you. What the hell happened? Tasha's heart sank. She quickly unlocked her phone and opened the message. It wasn't a post. It was a video. Her stomach turned as she watched it. A bystander had filmed the entire encounter. The video had been posted online, and now it was spreading like wildfire. There she was, standing in the middle of the restaurant, drenched in water, looking shocked and broken. The blonde waitress, standing behind her with that wicked grin, was the star of the show, laughing while Tasha stood there, unable to process what was happening. It was everywhere. On Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, hashtags like racist waitress, black woman humiliation, and justice for Tasha flooded the feed. People were outraged. But what made it worse was how the video had been edited. The narrative was already being shaped. Tasha was the victim of a racist attack, but more than that, she was now the poster child for black women enduring mistreatment in public spaces. She could hear the voices of strangers in her head. How dare they treat her like that? This is disgusting. But what hurt the most were the comments. She should have known better than to go to that restaurant in the first place. Tasha's blood boiled. How had things spiraled this quickly? How had she become the face of this viral moment? Her entire life, once private, had been ripped open for the world to see. It was as if the video was telling her story, telling everyone else's version of it. Her hands trembled as she typed a response to Marissa. I'm fine, just shaken up. I need to get out of here, but I'm scared. Tasha had always been the strong one, the one people went to for support. But now she felt so exposed, so vulnerable. What if this video ruined everything? What if her job, her career, her reputation, all of it, was now at risk because of a moment that was never her fault? A sudden knock on the window made her jump. It was a security guard from the restaurant. Ma'am, we need to talk, he said, his tone stern. Tasha rolled down the window slowly, heart racing. The last thing she wanted right now was a confrontation with anyone from that restaurant. Are you the woman who was involved in the incident earlier? The guard asked, his eyes scanning the empty parking lot behind her. Tasha nodded. Yes, I'm her. Look, I'm sorry about what happened in there, he said, glancing around nervously. But you need to understand that the restaurant is planning to release a statement. The manager wants to offer you an apology and… No, Tasha cut him off, shaking her head. This is not something that can be solved with an apology. The guard raised his eyebrow. I'm just telling you what's going on. They don't want this to get out of hand. Tasha's jaw clenched. What's done is done, she said, her voice tight. I don't need their apology. I need to know why this happened. Why they thought it was okay to treat me like that. She wasn't about to let them sweep it under the rug. Not this time. The video. The humiliation, she wasn't going to let them pretend like it wasn't a big deal. Her voice, even though she was trembling, came out stronger than she thought. I'll be speaking to my lawyer, Tasha added before rolling the window back up. The guard stood there for a moment. But Tasha didn't look back. She had to focus. She had to be strong for herself. For her child. She didn't want pity. She didn't want sympathy. She wanted answer. As she drove away from the restaurant, the weight of what had just happened hit her all over again. She didn't know what her next move would be. But one thing was for sure. She wouldn't let the waitresses nor the restaurant get away with this. She dialed her lawyer's number. Tasha's heart hammered in her chest as she waited for the phone to ring through. Her fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles were turning white. The reality of what had just happened, the video, the humiliation was still too raw. She had thought she could brush it off. But now it was clear this wasn't just an incident, it was the beginning of a battle she wasn't prepared for. Her lawyer, a woman named Karen, finally picked up. Tasha, I saw the video. Karen's voice was calm, but there was an underlying urgency. I've already had several calls about it. We need to act quickly. Tasha's breath caught in her throat. What do you mean, act quickly? There's already a lot of media attention on this, Karen explained. People are angry, and rightfully so, but it's also important to understand that the restaurant may try to discredit you, to make it look like you're overreacting. We need to stay ahead of this. Tasha closed her eyes, trying to steady her racing mind. They can't just pretend this didn't happen. That woman humiliated me in front of everyone. She poured water on me. It was intentional. I know, Karen responded, and we're going to hold them accountable. I'm sending over some documents for you to sign. We're filing a formal complaint, but we'll also be looking into possible defamation charges if they try to discredit your character. Defamation? Tasha repeated, still processing it all. Is that even possible? Yes, Karen replied firmly. You've already seen the comments online. The way the video was edited, it's shaping a false narrative. People are making assumptions about you, and the restaurant might use that to paint you in a negative light. We can't let that happen. Tasha nodded, feeling the weight of it all. Okay, I'll sign whatever you need me to, but I want this over. I want justice. I understand. We'll go after them the right way, Karen said, reassuring her. But it's going to take time. We'll need to gather all the evidence we can. I'll start by contacting the restaurant for their statement. The media will want to hear from them, but we'll control the message. Don't worry. Tasha exhaled, feeling a slight sense of relief, but deep down she knew this wasn't going to be easy. The restaurant was already a high-end establishment, and she wasn't sure how many people would believe her over their professional image. She would have to be strong, stronger than she had ever been before. After the call ended, Tasha drove straight to her apartment. Her mind raced. The whole world was watching her now. People from all walks of life were voicing their support online, but there were also people who didn't believe the waitress had acted out of malice. The comments were overwhelming, and most of them focused on race, turning her personal experience into something much bigger. She couldn't let that distract her, though. Her focus had to be on herself, her child, and taking control of this situation. The next morning, Tasha walked into her office with a heavy heart. Her coworkers had all heard about the incident, and the whispers followed her down the hall. Everyone was staring, some out of curiosity, others with judgmental eyes. Tasha knew she had to face this head-on. She wasn't going to hide from it. Hey Tasha, Mark, one of her colleagues, called out as she passed by. You all right? I saw the video. That was messed up. Tasha stopped, nodding curtly. Thanks for checking in. I just don't get it, Mark continued, his voice full of disbelief. I mean, I know you. You're not the kind of person to blow something like this out of proportion. I'm really sorry that happened. Tasha smiled weakly. I appreciate it, but it's not about what I'm blowing out of proportion. It's about what happened to me, and it's about holding them accountable. Mark gave her a puzzled look, But before he could say anything else, Tasha turned and walked into her office, closing the door behind her. She sat down at her desk staring at her phone. The social media posts were piling up. The support was overwhelming, but the negativity, especially the comments from people who were questioning her version of events, was eating away at her. Why were there so many people who didn't believe her? Why were there so many who thought this was just a misunderstanding? She had to focus. The lawyer had given her some clarity, but she needed to think through the next steps. She needed to be smart. She couldn't afford to let emotions drive her decision. But before she could gather her thoughts, there was a knock at the door. Tasha? It was her manager, Lisa. Can we talk for a second? Tasha put her phone down, standing up. Sure, I saw the video, and I know you're going through a lot right now, but I just wanted to remind you of company policy. We've had some conversations about maintaining professionalism, and while I completely understand the frustration, we need to be careful. This could affect your standing here. Tasha's blood ran cold. Are you suggesting that I shouldn't pursue this, that I should just let it go? No, of course not, Lisa quickly replied, her hands raised defensively. I just want to make sure you're thinking about the bigger picture. There are consequences to everything. Sometimes it's better to take a step back and let things cool off. Tasha's mind raced. This was the last thing she needed to hear right now. What bigger picture? A white waitress pours water on me in a racist attack and you want me to back off? Lisa hesitated. I'm not saying that at all. I just think you should be careful. There are a lot of eyes on this. You don't want to jeopardize your career. Tasha felt a knot tighten in her stomach. It was becoming clear this wasn't just about the restaurant. It was about her, about how the world saw her. People were already drawing their lines in the sand, and she had to decide which side she was on. I'm not backing down, Tasha said, her voice cold but firm. This isn't just about me. This is about what happened to me and how it's going to affect people like me in the future. I'm fighting this, and I'll fight it with everything I have. Lisa's face softened, but she didn't say anything else. She simply nodded and left the room. Tasha sat back down at her desk, the weight of everything pressing down on her. The next steps were clear. The fight for justice was just beginning, and it was going to be harder than she could have ever imagined. But here was no turning back now. Days passed, and the noise of the world outside continued to grow. Tisha's life was no longer the private existence it once was. Her name, her face, her story were plastered across social media, news outlets, and even local TV stations. She was now the face of something bigger, something much harder to control. The phone calls kept coming, news outlets wanting interviews, lawyers offering their services, and strangers sending messages of both support and hatred. The noise was deafening, and it was taking a toll. But it was the private moments, the ones in her quiet apartment, that wore her down the most. The days of scrolling through social media had become unbearable. Every new comment felt like a knife to her chest. Some were supportive, urging her to stand strong, but many others were filled with judgment. People calling her weak, accusing her of playing the race card, and suggesting that maybe, just maybe, she was exaggerating the whole thing for attention. There were those who saw her as nothing more than a victim, and others who blamed her for letting things escalate in the first place. Tasha had been through difficult times before, but this was different. This was the kind of attention she never asked for, but was now impossible to escape. She stood by the window staring out at the city skyline, her thoughts swirling. Her mind kept returning to the restaurant, to the faces of the waitresses. The humiliation, but more than that, the resentment. She hadn't just been hurt physically, she had been torn down emotionally, dehumanized. And now, it seemed like no matter what she did, she couldn't win. She heard the familiar buzz of her phone on the counter. Another message, another notification. This time it was from her lawyer, Karen. Tasha, I've spoken to the restaurant's legal team. They're offering a settlement. They want to make this go away quietly. I don't trust it. I think they're trying to sweep it under the rug. Let me know if you want to discuss. Tasha stared at the message, her stomach sinking. A settlement? They were trying to buy her silence. She couldn't let that happen, not after everything she'd been through. But the pressure was mounting. The financial strain of the situation, the emotional toll, the attention, it was all taking its toll on her. Every step forward felt like one step back. She didn't know what to do now. After a long pause, she typed back, "No. I want justice. not money. Let's take this to court. She hit send, then placed the phone down with a sigh. This was it. There would be no turning back now. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about what she stood for, her sense of dignity, her self-respect, and the future she wanted for her child. She couldn't let a few ignorant people destroy that. But as the days turned into weeks, the consequences of her decision began to hit harder than expected. It wasn't just the media or the strangers online. Her own friends began pulling away. Marissa, her closest confidant, had always been there for her, but lately their conversations had become more distant. It wasn't that Marissa didn't support her, it was that she couldn't fully understand what Tasha was going through. "You're making a big deal out of this," Marissa had said in their last phone call. "It's just water. You'll be fine. Just let it go." Tasha's heart ached at those words. They weren't just a dismissal of her pain, but a subtle reinforcement of everything she had been fighting against. Water was just water to Marissa, but to Tasha, it had been a symbol of everything that was wrong with the world, a reminder of how easily people like her could be humiliated without consequence. "I can't just let it go," Tasha had snapped. "Do you think I'm overreacting? This isn't just about water, it's about how they saw me, how they treated me." There was silence on the other end of the line. "I just think it's better for your peace of mind to let it go," Marissa had said. "You've already caused a scene. Maybe it's time to move on." Tasha's throat tightened, and she fought back the tears. She had been through so much, and now it felt like she was losing the people she cared about the most. Everyone seemed to have an opinion on how she should handle the situation, but no one truly understood. No one could know what it felt like to be treated like that in public, to feel like your life was no longer yours, to have every action scrutinized and analyzed by the world. As Tasha prepared herself for the court battle ahead, the isolation grew. She spent her days gathering evidence, talking to lawyers, and trying to keep her focus. But it wasn't just the legal fight she had to worry about. It was the toll this was taking on her relationship with her child, with her son. She couldn't be the strong mother she wanted to be if she let this thing eat away at her. But one thing was certain. She couldn't let them win. The waitresses, the restaurant, the people who made her feel less than human. She couldn't let them think they had power over her. She would not be silenced. There was one small comfort, her baby. Every time she felt like giving up, she placed her hands on her belly and reminded herself why she had to keep fighting. This wasn't just about her, it was about her child, the future she wanted to build, and the dignity she would not let anyone take from her. Tasha wasn't going to let them tear her down. The world had underestimated her before, and she wasn't about to let them do it again. She would take the fight to them, no matter the cost. The courtroom was quiet, an almost suffocating silence filling the air. Tasha sat in the front row, her hands clasped tightly together, her eyes fixed on the table before her. The only sounds were the rustling of papers and the shuffle of feet, as lawyers and witnesses prepared for the trial to begin. It felt like an eternity, but this was it, the culmination of everything she had been through. Tasha had never imagined she would be here, standing in a courtroom fighting for justice. A part of her had hoped it would end with an apology, maybe a small compensation, and then she could move on with her life. But the events of the past months had shown her that the fight for dignity, for respect, was much bigger than any one person. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every black woman who had ever been disrespected, dehumanized, or made to feel invisible. As the judge entered the room, everyone stood. Tasha's heart raced in her chest, but she didn't look away. She wouldn't let fear control her now. The trial began with opening statement. Tasha's lawyer, Karen, stood tall as she spoke passionately about the discrimination that had occurred in the restaurant. She highlighted how the waitresses had targeted Tasha with malicious intent and used the viral video as a powerful piece of evidence. The video, filmed by a bystander, showed Tasha's humiliation in full force. Karen made it clear that Tasha was a victim of racism, and no matter how much the restaurant tried to play it down, the evidence was irrefutable. Then came the defense, two slick lawyers representing the restaurant. They painted the situation as an accident, a misunderstanding. They argued that the water had been spilled by mistake, that it was all just a poor accident, and that Tasha was overreacting. But Tasha knew better. She knew what they were trying to do, make her seem like a dramatic, emotional woman who was simply looking for attention. The lawyers did everything in their power to discredit her. They tried to paint her as someone who was exaggerating the truth. But Tasha held her ground. She had rehearsed her testimony, but when the moment finally came, it was harder than she had imagined. Her voice shook at first as she took the stand, but she refused to back down. I was targeted, she began, her voice gaining strength with each word. I was humiliated in front of strangers, and this was not just about the water, it was about the way I was treated. Like I didn't matter, like I was less than human. The defense tried to interrupt, but Tasha raised her hand, stopping them. The room fell silent. I'm not here for money. I'm here because what happened to me shouldn't happen to anyone. No one should have to endure that kind of treatment. Not in a public space, not in a restaurant, not ever. Her words hung in the air, powerful and unshakable. She could feel the weight of the moment. This was her she wasn't just fighting for herself, but for every black woman who had been treated unfairly, for every person who had been pushed down by ignorance and hatred. As Tasha finished speaking, the tension in the room was palpable. She sat back down, her body shaking, but her resolve stronger than ever. The trial dragged on for several more days. The defense continued to try and undermine her, but Tasha's testimony had already made its mark. Her lawyers presented their final arguments, focusing on the emotional and psychological toll the incident had taken on Tasha. The waitress's actions had left scars deeper than anyone could see. And then came the moment of truth, the closing statement. Karen spoke again, but this time she wasn't just presenting evidence. She was pleading with the jury. This is about accountability. This is about standing up to racism, standing up to discrimination, and saying this is not okay. We cannot allow anyone to think it's acceptable to treat another human being like this, regardless of who they are. The jury deliberated for what felt like an eternity. Tasha's heart beat wildly in her chest, and the weight of the trial pressed down on her like an unrelenting force. She couldn't help but wonder, had it been enough? Had she said enough to make a difference? Then the door opened, and the jury filed back into the room. The judge stood, signaling for silence. The moment she had been waiting for had finally arrived. The jury has reached a verdict, the judge announced. Will the defendant please rise? Tasha's heart pounded as she stood, her hands trembling. She couldn't bring herself to look at the defense attorneys. She was too afraid of what they might say. The judge looked at the jury, then back at Tasha. We, the jury, find the defendant liable for racial discrimination and humiliation against the plaintiff, Tasha Matthews. A wave of relief washed over her. The room seemed to blur as she heard the words she had been waiting for. The tears welled up in her eyes. She had done it. She had won. The restaurant was ordered to pay a significant settlement, but it wasn't the money that mattered. It was the principle, the victory over injustice. Tasha looked down at her hands, her mind still spinning. She thought of everything she had gone through, the humiliation, the isolation, the judgment. But now she had won. As she left the courthouse, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She wasn't just a victim of racism. She was a warrior, and she wasn't going to let anyone silence her ever again.